Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Hard Hats and High Tech, the podcast where construction meets innovation. I'm your host, Bernardita Carlson, and today I'm really excited to be welcoming a guest with a very unusual background. From early beginnings in IT to managing million pounds worth of infrastructure projects in a live military theater in the Middle East, Jamie Mills now leads Signature Build Group, a high-end residential construction company delivering luxury homes across London and the Cotswolds. With experience that ranges from war zones to luxury neighborhoods, Jamie knows a lot about risk, performance, and what truly defines quality in construction. Hi, Jamie, how are you?
Hey, Bernard. Yeah, very good. Thank you. Very good. And yeah, pleased to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you here. You have a really interesting background. So, would you like to start by giving our audience a little bit more of details on that?
Yeah, of course, of course. So currently, as you mentioned, the managing director of Signature Build. So we're a high-end residential construction company based here in London, and we service London, the home counties, and the Cotswolds. But it wasn't a traditional path that got me here. I started off many moons ago, yeah, working in IT. For those of us old enough, there was a fear or a bit of scaremongering um, in 1999 of something called the Y2K bug. So I think there was this fear that all computers were going to stop working as
Oh,
soon as we hit the year 2000. So I saw that as an opportunity to get into in IT and probably get overpaid as a young 19-year-old for doing a job that I probably wasn't qualified for. But as time moved on, I progressed in the world of IT for a while, traveled the world and did some very interesting things, but ended up working in the Middle East, as you mentioned. So I spent a good number of years living out in Iraq, based out in Basra, and started off out there sort of operating as part of a support force that would help the military. So, well, not military myself, keen to add. I don't have the camo gear or the war stories as such, but yeah. So started off on sort of working on IT projects out there that moved into infrastructure, and then before you know it, we're managing sort of large scale infrastructure projects whilst there's rockets and helicopters flying overhead. So certainly learned how to work in pressurized environments and spent a lot of time learning about military efficiency. And off the back of that, on returning, the normal desk job didn't quite feel
I
like it
can
was
imagine.
it was a good fit. The contrast to living and breathing the life in Iraq, and I actually moved
Mm.
down to Kuwait and Bahrain and a few other areas. So I bounced around the Middle East for a little while, but returning home and going back to an IT or infrastructure role didn't appeal. So that was when I decided to set up my own business. And construction came to me. I've obviously with the project management background around those infrastructure projects. I'd learned an awful lot and become qualified as a project manager whilst out there. Um, and then, I did what most business owners do. I took the leap. I took the leap of faith. I made the decision to step across into the world of self-employment, set the business up. Started that with my brother and a small group, and started on our very first project being sort of a £14,000 kitchen refurb, and everything just grew from there. So I took a lot of learnings from my time, both in the Middle East, but also from working within IT and systems, and understanding how an industry like construction, especially residential construction at the scale at which we operate, is normally very slow to adopt technology. There's a fear of not knowing, right? So lots of people that work in construction here, their time served, so they will have left school and they would have learnt their trade via apprenticeships or vocational training, and not really spent time investing in their education around technology, around systems and processes. And so for that reason, the industry, certainly in this niche, if you will, hasn't evolved. and hasn't kept up with the changing demands of technology, but also in the changing benefits of technology as well. And I think that's where my background's both with
Mm.
one foot in the in the camp of delivery around, you know, how to operate under pressure, how to be efficient, how to work within certain you know, work with certain lines of communication, with hierarchy. That, you know, you pick a lot of that up from the military, but also having that uh, IT lens on what we do has allowed me to sort of combine the two, you know, and the hope is, and our clients testament to that, you know, that we bring that to all the projects that we deliver, and it's something we're looking to grow and build upon every day that we turn up. So yeah, it's not necessarily the most linear path to running
Mm.
a construction company, but I do think there's a lot of lessons that I've learned over the years that have certainly helped the business grow, and you know, we've been the benefit of that success.
Okay. Wow, you mentioned a lot of really interesting points that I want to touch on in more detail. So let's break it down a little bit. So you went from IT, then to the military, and then, as you said, you landed in construction. But what really drew you to construction? Why that industry and not another one?
Yeah, look, I think whether it's sort of IT systems, defense projects, or high-end homes, I've always been drawn to sort of building things that last, right? So building things that sort of have a bit of a legacy, and so that was always appealing. And sort of exposure to sort of mission critical projects taught me about structure and precision, and you know, it's those skills that help lend to those sort of lasting legacies. It's quite satisfying when, you know, you're able to leave a positive impact on someone's life. So if it's their home, or equally on a landmark, we've done a lot of listed buildings here in London, and some of these buildings are, you know, 500 years old. We've just finished a 16th century farmhouse down on the south
Wow.
coast. You know, we're uncovering artifacts within that building that are 400 years old. I mean, that's, you know, it's older than America, right? So and so to be part of that and to preserve that for the next generations, you know, for the next century, or however long that restoration sort of holds, it feels like that's a bit of a privilege to be able to do that. And so the fact that we get to do something that leaves a lasting impact has always been something that's appealing. And yeah, that for me was a big draw to construction.
That's a really nice answer. I like not only looking at the business side of things, but also looking at building a home for people, families, memories, all of that. It's really nice. Now you've been in construction, I guess, long enough to be able to recognize some of the challenges, which you already mentioned at the beginning of
Yeah.
the conversation. So, what's one lesson from your military experience that you think the construction industry still hasn't fully embraced?
Yeah, a good question. Look, some of this is driven by the contractors, right? So guys like us, some of this is driven by the industry. But if there's one thing that I wish we could do more of, and I wish we had time to do more of, to ensure a project success, it would be sort of that relentless preparation that the military insist upon. Too often, construction is quite reactive. It's not you know, it's not proactive. And often, look, that's not often the contractor's fault. Quite often, it's because, you know, clients, a project comes your way, you go through the tender process, or you negotiate with the client, and then it's, can you start next week? Can you start in a month? Can you start? And you know, sometimes you need to react to that, and you need to be flexible. But the projects that have yielded the greatest success for us, so, you know, been as close to budget as possible, been as close to timeline as possible, have a happy client at the end of it, and have achieved the quality that we're happy with, they're generally the projects where we've had the opportunity to prepare and relentlessly prepare for those jobs. So, you know, run full risk registers, you know, look at the supply chain, and how we can de-risk delivery dates, and how we can ensure quality, but doing as much upfront as possible
Mm.
definitely gives each project the best opportunity for success. And so we try and do that as best we can on all of our projects. And like I say, we've done enough of them now over the last 15 years to be able to recognize when a project has benefited from that planning process. And I'm not just saying organize your materials to arrive on day one. I mean, stepping through the entire project, highlighting where those risks might sit, and working with the architect or the interior designer, or to mitigate those as best we can. So yeah, the caption here is relentless preparation. The military are great at it. Construction can definitely do better.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Planning is such an important step, and it can help you also anticipate any issues that can affect other challenges like budget control and stuff like this. So, could you maybe share with us an example where this military discipline help you in construction?
Yeah. So look, I think that the key is to try and approach each of these projects as if it's like everything's mission critical. Right. So to give everything the right level of urgency from the start. Too often in construction, and uh, this is definitely something I picked up. What you don't want to be doing is having the panic right at the end and be like, "Wow, we need to get these 10 things done in the final week." So it's taking a mission critical approach where everything's urgent and important from day one. And what tends to happen then is that if you do that, and I'm not going to leave that till next week, or actually I'm going to respond to that now. I'm going to get back to the client when I said I would. By taking a mission critical approach to it and applying urgency to everything from the start, you tend to build momentum, right? And you tend to you tend to be able to deal with issues well in advance of them actually, or yeah, you tend to be able to deal with risks, sorry, before they become issues. And so that's definitely something I've learned. Everything's mission critical, and treat it that way. And don't take your foot off the gas, because construction has a nasty way of coming back to bite you in the backside. And a lazy couple of weeks on a year-long project can have a real significant impact. So yeah, mission critical approach to everything from the start is probably a key lesson I've learned, and we apply that to all of our projects.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. And I guess that proactive approach also helps you have better relationships with all of the rest of the teams in the project and all of that. So that's great. Now let's move into the residential construction part of your background.
Yeah.
In your experience in this area, what are the biggest inefficiencies you see in high-end residential construction projects?
It's right at the beginning, right? And I think, and I'm talking before we even get to talk about bringing our teams to site to start the works. Um, Early contractor involvement in a project, it is something I preach about all the time. Now, whether it's us or whether it's one of our competitors or another business out there, every single project would benefit from engaging with the contractor early. And there's a big sort of trends that I've noticed, and I'm part of a coaching community that every Monday 30 to 40 construction businesses, we're on our Monday momentum call, and we talk about it openly, and it's a real common trend. There often seems to be a misalignment between brief, so the architectural brief or the brief the client gives the architect, and budget. They're not aligned. And I often ask, why our architects are wonderful. The teams and companies we work with, they're great. They deliver these amazing projects, and it's a privilege to deliver them. But they're, lots of these guys are architects, and they're trained as architects, and they've spent a long time doing that. So I would never question their design aesthetic. I would never question how they approach the design and because of any project that we work on. But yet there's a lot of responsibility sits with them with trying to align the budget. And I think a big inefficiency is what happens is a project gets designed, they take a brief, the project gets designed, and the project will evolve over that design period. And if you're tendering for a project or even negotiating on it, what will often happen is the prices will come back for that project that's being designed, and an architect will deliver the costs to their client, and you'll get a phone call a week later saying, Jamie, really sorry, but you're just too expensive. That's always a shock. You think, I thought I did quite well there. I thought we were in the right ballpark. And so I'll always ask for feedback, and I'll say, so tell me, how much more expensive were we than the other guys? I'm like, oh no, you're all too expensive. I'm like, okay. So there's the problem. So it's not that we're too expensive, it's that the budget was incorrect from the start. So then often what happens is they go back for a bit of a redesign. So then and then the dreaded words value engineering get introduced to the equation. And what you end up doing is chopping the project to bits. Oh, if we don't do that, we can replace it with this lesser material, or we can bring this product in. I tell you what, let's go for a cheaper quality window, and you end up just all this hard work that's been undertaken by the architect often just gets thrown out the window because we're trying to bring it in on budget. So that's a huge inefficiency, and it's really common. And I understand the challenge because, as I said, whilst you trust your architects to deliver upon their design brief, they're not there. They don't necessarily have their finger on the pulse of what it costs to build something. So you've got two options there, and this is a way to bridge that inefficiency: is to bring in a QS, a quantity surveyor, or a cost consulting company to work with them as they're going through that design process. And in that way, by the time it gets to that tender process, we're going to be in the right ballpark. We're going to know roughly what it's going to cost. We might be 10% up or down depending on what company you go for, but typically you're going to be in the right place. Now, the better solution, and I say this just because I'm a contractor, and it may not actually be that this is the best solution, but I'll promote it anyway, is to engage with your contractor early. So as we're going through the project, let's price it up as we go. If you tell me you're working with me on this project, we'll form a delivery team with your architect and your interior designer. And as we go through, we can be pricing up the project as we go. So by the time we get to the end of the design process, we're almost there. So that really bridges that inefficiency gap. What we then know is that we've got a project that is costed and designed, and now we just need to deliver it. Too often we get a project that's designed but not costed. And if we don't do that, that inefficiency, it's a whole waste of time, and lots of projects get left on the drawing board. They don't even make it to site because that happens, and no one ends up winning that one. The contractor doesn't get the work, the architect doesn't get the construction element of the project, and ends up with all architects want their designs built for sure. That's the dream. There's no point just leaving it on the paper, and the client isn't moving forward with the project that they wish. So that is a huge inefficiency, and there's probably lots more as well, but that's one that I'm keen to talk about because early contractor engagement or early cost consultancy engagement will mean a lot more projects get built and a lot less work is wasted.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting thing that you mentioned, because I guess it goes back to this huge challenge for the construction industry, which is collaboration. Everyone doing their part of the work separately, and then when you try to put it together, maybe it doesn't make sense. So I guess bringing the contractor in early, you can also use their advice, not only in terms of cost, but also quality and other points. So I think that's really good advice that you give there as well. But there's also pressures in terms of delivery, right? So delivery is a huge
Mhm.
topic for contractors as well. So what do you wish clients and architects maybe understood better in terms of construction delivery?
Yeah, another good question. You've done this before, I can tell. Yeah, so I think clients often need to understand that the plan on paper will always evolve to some degree. It's it, it the project starts once the shovel goes, the shovels are in the ground, and it will always evolve. Sort of drawings are the dream, and delivery is the reality. And I think I'm sure it happens worldwide, but contractors are often tarred with a brush that isn't really fair, or a character that isn't fair, a couple of bad apples, and it seems to be that everyone feels that there's sort of some a negative, that contractors are there just making money hand over fist, and that they're focused on themselves and not collaborating. I can tell you, as I mentioned before, I'm part of this coaching community, and there's no one in that community that acts in that way. And a majority of contractors out there are craving that collaboration. But the problem is that the advice that the clients get, that's lots of these clients are lay people. They don't come into these projects knowing much other than they've watched grand designs or they've watched programs of that ilk. They've spoke to their friends that have had projects done, and everyone's got a war story. But communication solves all, right? So I think I wish they could come in understanding that we are a team and that it's not client in one silo, architect in another, and contractor in the third. It needs to be a delivery partnership, and we use that language all the way through our sort of sales process, and when we're engaging with a client, we're looking to be delivery partners. We don't want to be deemed your builder or your building contractor. We're delivery partners, and that's because for this to be successful, we can't do it on our own. If you hand us a set of drawings on a £2 million project, and we just run with it, and at the end of it we deliver you what's on the drawing, it may well not be quite what you envisaged. But if you're not checking all the way through and readdressing and balancing and communicating, I think there's a real danger of relationships breaking down, and when that happens, construction becomes even harder. So yeah, the understanding that the delivery team is there to serve your end goal as the client, and that collaboration and communication are what effectively make that work. I wish there was a sort of a more open mindset towards construction, and that we moved away from these ideas or these sort of historical views on what a contractor or a builder or a building company are like. And to understand that as we move forwards using technology, as we move forward using different forms of construction and different tools, it all comes down to communication, right? So from that collaboration is what delivers success on any project. So yeah, try and hammer that home as early as possible, and sort of repeating it during our sales process. And some clients really get it and they really engage with it, and others, it takes a bit more time, but we'll keep fighting the good fight.
You mentioned technology there, which is a really, really important topic in terms of collaboration as well. You mentioned at the beginning of the conversation that this industry is really slow to change, which nothing new for us. So how do you think digitalization could have the biggest impact in the construction industry, whether it's in terms of collaboration or other things?
So it is slow, but there are solutions out there, right? I think that's the first thing. And I think I think what's happening now is that we've got, it's a bit of an American term, but we've got the boomers, right? The baby boomer generation that over the next sort of decade will be sort of aging out of the industry. They'll be looking to retire, they'll be looking to sell their businesses or pass them down or have less of an active role. And obviously, the next generation, which I would fall under, would be, we're not digitally native, in as much as we grew up in an analog world, but we've witnessed that transference across into the digital world, and now across into the world of AI. So we're certainly more open to the acceptance of digital solutions or tech solutions in what has been a fairly analog industry for a long time. So I think the acceptance of technology in construction and the adoption will increase. I mean, AI will certainly mean that you'll force that to happen, but also because of the people leading these businesses now are going to be more comfortable with technology, we're going to see a bigger adoption regardless. But yeah, digitalization, I mean, it is having and will have a huge impact on the industry. Things like tendering, handovers, even site meetings, they're all ripe for automation. And there's a whole host of tools out there that can deliver that for you. There's a couple that we use, and, we have a tech stack that would probably more resemble that of an IT company than a construction company. And for example, within our team, we want everyone to be AI literate. We want, are there training courses that we can be putting ourselves on? How do we, we'll have in-house conversations about how can we use AI to speed this process up? How can we use AI to keep us lean as a business, so our operating costs, so our overheads are as lean as possible. And so, we're always talking about that. But, it's I'm not sure construction definitely. There's lots of apps out there and there's lots of tools, and I think in the world of AI now, there's going to be 1,000 tools that hit the market, and not that many are going to stick. So I think in construction, there's already some really good tools and apps out there. It just needs better adoption and better education. The ones we already have, they work well for us. And sometimes it's just filling the gaps, right? So sort of joining these systems together. But it will allow construction businesses, technology will allow construction businesses to run leaner. So you won't necessarily need people in some of the traditional roles that existed within these construction businesses, say 20 years ago. And what that in turn means, when the market fluctuates, which it does, that you're not sitting there with a huge overhead of staff that, because you've had to recruit for every single role. And that's often the pressure that construction businesses find themselves under. They're top heavy because they've had a successful period, and then maybe, a few projects didn't quite go their way, and they end up with with a big workforce and not enough work to sustain it. I think tech will allow us to be more efficient in that world, and I think it will have a positive, and it is already, and will continue to have a positive impact on how the construction industry remains sustainable.
Well, it's not a surprise to see that you're technology driven due to your IT background. But it's really also good to hear someone who's right inside of the industry saying that the technology is being adopted, because we always hear this like speech where, yeah, technology is not being adopted and companies need to do it, etc. But even with the benefits that you mentioned, there's still companies that maybe think it's too complex, or that they want to keep doing things the way that they are doing it them at the moment. So what would you say to those companies, maybe about training or some of the points that you mentioned?
Yeah, look, I'll tell you what's really complex is 3 months delays and six figures lost due to bad communication. That's really complex. Adopting some technology in a pragmatic and thoughtful way is a drop in the ocean compared to that. So you've got to look at what technology offers and the cost of implementation versus the status quo. You know, I'm not afraid to say it, we've had projects in the past where, an instruction has been issued via email, found its way into someone's inbox, 20 other emails come in, gets missed, no one sees it. We turn up next week, say, oh no, I asked that door to be over there. I sent you the change instruction via email. You're like, okay, you go back through your email, you find it. It's cost you £10,000 to move the door because you've already plastered, you've already painted. And it's things like that that technology will help you to mitigate. And so so I think there is often a reluctance, and some of this will be about, it goes back to what I said before. I think that there will be some in the industry that technology is a bit scary for them, or they're late on in their career and they've done very well, or they've done well enough without adopting certain tools and technology. But equally, I'm not sure that's the audience, right? Because the future will adopt this, and it won't be nice to have. It will be you must have, otherwise you're going to get left behind. If you don't adopt this technology, if you don't adopt these technologies that are available, you're going to end up with a top heavy workforce, as I mentioned before, when you could be really streamlined, using these tools. Having sort of central hubs for drawings, making sure that drawings get updated and everyone knows about it, that they're all located in one place, and you don't have a folder in someone's office or a printout on someone's desk, or one person's been emailed the updated drawings but someone else hasn't. Be able to manage tasks in a central location, understanding who's responsible for what. Using technology in this way, it means there's no excuses for misalignment. And when I talk about technology, I'm not talking about WhatsApp, right? If WhatsApp is your project tool, you're already behind, right? I'm talking about crafted, custom made, construction ready delivery tools and applications that are there to make your life easier. And yeah, I think anyone that's wary about stepping into that world needs to take a look at what the horizon looks like, and to understand if people aren't adopting the right technologies at the right time, and doing it now, if they're not doing it, then they will get left behind.
Yeah, that is really true. I mean, it's not a matter of do I want to do it, is I just need to do it. Otherwise, I will stay behind. And it will be really interesting to see how is like you said before, older maybe generation of people working in construction, how it will switch to these younger generations that are already technology savvy from the beginning. So it will be an
Absolutely.
interesting transition too.
And look, for those listening that are a bit apprehensive about engaging on, with technology, with across their suite of applications, or with how they approach construction or run their businesses, my advice would be, start small and just move fast. You don't need to get rid of everything and throw the baby out with the bathwater. Start small, move fast. Don't wait till the clients demand the change. So you need to predict the change that the clients see. One of the best things, it's a really simple thing that really helps us. Lots of our clients are traveling a lot with business, or they're overseas, or if we're that they sort of move to that they move overseas whilst their projects are underway. Being able to log on and see a live update from from their vantage point on their app or on their iPad. I mean, just simple things like that are so powerful. But yeah, don't wait until the client demands it. Offer it. Be proactive. It goes back to what I said before. Be proactive with what you're offering your client, and it also makes it an easier sell. Being technology savvy, having an approach to whether it's AI or just adoption of technology, having a forward-thinking approach in itself positions you as a forward-thinking contractor. So hopefully during any decision-making process or tender process, that can only be a good thing, and it weighs heavy in your favor. So yeah, start small, move fast, and don't wait for the client to demand it. Offer it to the clients.
That's really valuable advice. At the end, the tools are there and it's up to us to make the most of them. So
Absolutely.
now, before we finish the conversation, I want to ask you something that I know maybe it's a difficult thing to answer because technology is changing so much. But if you have to guess, or what you wish in 10 years, how do you wish technology is reshaping residential construction?
Yeah, good question. Am I qualified to answer it? I can give it a go. Look, I think there's been introduction of various different technologies that haven't quite caught fire, or been picked up. So BIM in residential construction is one such item. It's difficult, right? Because often we're dealing with buildings that have existed for hundreds of years, or that have been put in place and they were never built from a digital standpoint in the beginning. So how accurate can surveys be? How accurate can measurements be? So there's a lot of work there to try and make BIM like workable in the renovation market. But I do think sort of along those lines, looking ahead, things like predictive data, being able to look at early risks, so warns of risks ahead of time before they hit. I do think that AI is probably going to run scheduling and cost control across projects, and even things like clash detection. When we're looking at new builds, your pipe runs and your steel don't quite match. There's a change there, and I think rather than us having to seek out these challenges, they're going to be presented to us in a proactive fashion. So yeah, and things like it's on everyone's mind, chat GPT, and there's various other guises there. But I think these sort of agentic AI elements that we're seeing, and operations and tools that we're seeing out there moment, they're only going to evolve. So I do think that some of the roles will become redundant in construction, because you're going to be able to ask your agent, your virtual agent, to go and run a cost comparison with your 5 regular suppliers, and come back and tell me which company can deliver first, who can deliver cheapest, and maintains the right level of quality for all that timber we need, or for all the plasterboard, or for all the dry lining. So I do think that agentic AI will help the running of businesses, but I do feel like sort of that predictive data, warning of risks ahead of time, and sort of cost control, clash detection. I think those elements they're on the horizon, and I think one thing we all need to be aware of is we think things are coming fast now. It's going to come faster as this, as the momentum grows within this AI space. We're going to see more and more coming at us, and adoption will be key. But to adopt, you've got to be open to it, right? You've got to understand the value in it. And yeah, I hope I hope it goes where we're headed. I hope we get there, and I hope that technology brings construction sort of into the modern age across the board, and not just for the select few that decide to adopt it now.
Yeah, but I think conversation like this one will empower people who haven't um, adopted technology yet to dive in and take the chance. Um,
Absolutely.
so, so yeah, I think that is a really good note to end on our conversation. Thank you, Jamie. You have provided such valuable advice, I think, for anyone who is listening to this. So I hope you enjoyed the conversation as well.
That was great.
And
No, it's great, and yeah, it's great. It's great to be able to talk about these things. And yeah, thanks very much for having me.
yeah, for sure. Maybe we'll have to meet again in a few years to see where all of these technology use cases that you mentioned went.
There you, there you go. It's a date.
Great. Well, to our audience, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll be back with another episode very soon.